Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome to another Houdini tutorial. So in this video, we are going to talk about copying. And this video is actually a little different than what I usually upload on the channel, because this one is actually about the workflow. It's not really about the project, or we're not really going to be making anything. We're just going to talk about the workflow and how to basically do copying. Now, I know it sounds simple, and it actually really is, but we're just going to build on top of our setup and see where it goes. Now, before I actually get into the video, I just wanted to mention that my Alien Lifeforms course, and by the way, this was the final outcome of the course. You might have seen this on my channel or on my Instagram. This is what we made in the course. Of course, we did a little bit of a simplified version of this, but it was in essence this scene, and now the course is actually available offline as well. If you enroll in the class, the first session is fully available, the second session is that they're working on it, and the third one is still not ready, but will be added soon. This is me. As you can see, this is the first session, and we have like all these different examples. I think we have like 54 examples, and we talk about all of them. We just cover all the different subjects, and then in the second session we just basically make the scene, the one we saw, actually to be exact, this one, and then in the third session we're actually going to render this. So if you guys are interested, you can just enroll in the class, take it offline. It doesn't have don't have to enroll in the live version. And by the way, the live version finished I think last week. Yeah, so if you're interested, you can just enroll. I'm always available on the Discord as well, on Houdini School's Discord server, so you can join. If you have any questions, you can just ask me there, or you can just message me on Instagram, email me, whatever. I'm always available. All right, so something that you might have noticed is that our tutorials, some of them are red, some of them are green. The green ones are the beginners. Currently we have just one beginner tutorial, but I'm planning on adding more. And the red ones are more intermediate, and the new ones are actually going to be, I think, in orange. I actually haven't really decided, but you know, let's just see how it goes. They're mostly going to be about the actual workflow. So we're basically going to be using simple shapes, simple geometries, mostly like test objects. We're not going to really worry about look dev. I mean, you can actually come up with really interesting stuff, and we're going to look into that, but these are mostly going to be simpler tutorials aimed for actually talking about the workflow. So our topic today is copying. Now, of course, we're going to cover a bunch of more topics as well. So copying is here. The rest attribute is really important, so I'm going to talk about that. We're going to talk about variants. We're going to talk about a little bit of rendering, which is mostly connected to the rest attribute. That's what I'm going to talk about. And a little bit of loops, some simple expressions, nothing too fancy, but they are actually quite useful. So let's get to it. All right. So I'm going to put down a GeoNode, and I'm going to dive inside. One of the nodes that I've probably worked with before, type CTP, copy to points. It's one of the most basic Houdini nodes, and it's quite popular. And well, the reason is really simple. You basically copy any geometry you want into any points space. So just for starting the project, let's just put down a grid, and this is my grid, 10 by 10. I'm just gonna add a scatter node to add maybe, I don't know, like 500 points, maybe 200 points. Yeah. Now let's just put down a box for the time being. Now let's visualize it. There we go. Probably knew what's gonna happen. So let's make it more interesting. Of course, if you are familiar, and I'm just going to bring it down to like maybe 100 and uncheck this relax iteration, so I have more randomized boxes in here. Yep. probably are familiar with the workflow. We usually add the attribute randomize, we randomize the p scale. Of course, we can also randomize the color. As you can see, by default, it puts down a CD attribute. We bring this down to 1, maybe a minimum value of 0.25, something like that, and we get our shape. Great. So let's make it more complicated. I'm actually going to delete this node, and I'm going to use one of well, not the newest nodes, that they weren't introduced in Houdini 19, but they were introduced in Houdini 18.5, and I really enjoy them because they're quite good. And they're the adjust nodes. And attribute adjust float actually by default puts down p scale. So it's going to create this p scale for us, and it's set to constant, and the value is 0 by default. You can see you can play with it, but you get all these different types. You can set it random. It basically does what the attribute randomize does. Maybe a little better because you have all these controls in here. You have post-process control, so you can actually fit it. I really love the way side effects has been handling attribute, basically attribute noises. So right now the mountain noise is actually pretty much the same. The attribute noise is the same, and you actually have attribute noise float as well. So you can just literally generate a simple, and let me just change it to constant. And when you add this attribute noise float, you can actually add to this. So bring the amplitude down, up, you can actually multiply it. But you don't really have to do it like this, because the adjust float actually has all of these presets inside of it. I kind of feel like the attribute noise is not really useful for these type of effects. You can just use attribute noise if you are working with a sort of unknown attribute, if you just want to play with it, and if your goal is to actually add noise. But otherwise, honestly, you can just come here and set it to noise as well. Basically gives you the same workflow. You get all the same noise types in here: alligator, Berlin, fast, which is the kind of quicker one, and you can of course animate it as well. When you play it, they're gonna move. It's always interesting to play with these. So yeah, I'm pretty much only using the adjust nodes these days: adjust float, adjust integer, adjust vector, and adjust color. And each one of them actually put down a value by default. So we've seen adjust float and adjust color. Well, of course, it's going to put down color. And by the way, this node is actually quite amazing. Paula Steves actually has a really good tutorial on this node, which SideFX just put on their YouTube channel. So I would highly recommend watching that. Let's put down another adjust. We have adjust integer, which is really important. We're going to talk about this particular attribute that this node puts by default. Also, we have a vector. It's the v attribute, velocity, and of course integer, which is variant, which is our main topic today. We're actually not really going to be using this node, but I just wanted to mention it because it is nice that you get this variant attribute. If you're not familiar with variant, it's a really useful node because you get to do so much with it. Not a node, an attribute. So let's actually do it. So we have this grid, and I'm adding 200, I think, 100 points to it. And what I want to do is actually I want to add 2 shapes in here, not just this box. I want to add a box, but I also want to add a sphere. So how would I go about that? Well, the variant attribute comes to play. First of all, on your copy to points, you actually get this piece attribute, which by default it's set to variant. So when you check that, it's gonna look for this variant attribute, and it's gonna use this attribute in order to kind of read which geometry you wanna load in here. So we have box. Let's also add a sphere. And by default, I've set this to be on the polygon. Maybe just bring it 0.5 from scale, so it's a little bit smaller. And you can of course add color here as well. So let's just merge these two together, add it in here, and let's just see what happens. So copy to points is actually loading both of them. If you don't believe me, you can just increase the scale in here and you can see we have both of them, but that's not what we're looking for. Of course, we're looking for a scenario where we either have the box or we have the sphere. Now, there are multiple ways for setting this up. The best way for doing this is really using the variant attribute. So let's set that up. We already checked this variant attribute in here, so let's actually create our variants. So I'm gonna put down, either put down a wrangle or put down an attribute create, whatever you prefer. Type in here variant. Of course, wrangle is easier, but you know, whatever is easier for you. In the type, you can set it to integer. Float is also fine in my experience, but this is technically an integer attribute. So this one, we're just going to leave it at 0. Just going to copy it, paste it there, and we're going to say, bring the value to 1. Now, we're still not done because we have these variants, but we don't have the variant assigned to our points. So we're going to put down attribute from piece. It's a node introduced in Houdini 18.5. The way it works is you connect the geometry to the second output, the points to the first output. Now, it says piece attribute name, but we are actually looking for variant. So when you connect this, we're not going to actually see anything. But if you come here and change it to variant, there we go. As you can see, this was before and this is after. So some of our points are boxes, some of our points are spheres. This is basically the variant is all about. So you can use a noise for it. You can use patches, and this is not really actually obvious right now. So what I'm going to do is actually increase this. And my P scale, I'm actually going to bring this right down. So maybe 0.5, 3, 0.3, and maybe 0.05. Yeah, okay, that's pretty good. And of course, you can also add color. So maybe this one is like this. Maybe copy this point, this node, put it there, change it to like this. There we go. So we have a nice color and have our P-scale attributes, we have our variants. They're all working together nicely. And let's talk about the patches. So patches, you like this patch in here. You can change it to just purely random. So they are more randomized. Now you might not be able to actually see it right now. So what I'm gonna do is actually add another variant. As you can see, it's actually quite cumbersome. So yeah, torus. I have to copy this to connect it in here. Set this to be 2. Other node. Let's say this. Connect it down there. There you have it. And we can still keep playing with these values. So noise. Going to be based on a particular noise that we input in here. Random. Patches. So patches gives us similar objects in similar patches. So for example, this particular patch is mostly torus. This one is a box. This one is like the sphere. And you can play with it, sort of change it around, distort it, something like this. Size up. You can bring the patch size up actually to get something like this. So now as you can see, like we have bigger patches, it becomes more obvious, and you can offset, you can shuffle them, sort of change their places. So basically, as you can see, you're keeping the place but changing geometry. Or you can just shuffle it, offset it, and just get different things. Yeah, that's pretty much it. It's pretty basic, but let's keep building on top of it. All right. So again, if you want to add a fourth geometry, I'm going to add maybe a platonic solid. And I'm just going to copy this variant. And as you can see, it's getting boring. I don't like to keep adding these. Also, it would be nice if I had like maybe a very simple, or maybe a loop that could just run through this whole thing and automatically create my variant attribute. So I don't have to actually set it up for each object I add. I can just keep merging things and everything happens after the merge. It would make my life so much easier. Of course, by the way, I did forget to mention you can pack and instance this thing, so it becomes super light. We have like 1,000 pack geos right now. Very efficient, and it's actually quite fast. As we go forward, it actually becomes so much more obvious. And by the way, of course, you can just relax your points if you want to get less randomized points in here. You can, of course, bring this up. But even a better way of doing this, in my opinion, is actually relaxing them, using point relax, which is quite useful. You just have to wire your p-scale in here and surface there. Basically visualizes, as you can see the change. Just go to end. There we go. This was unrelaxed points, and these are relaxed, and you can just play with it, relax them as much as you can. And as you can see, they are sitting really nice. It is taking our p-scale into account, so if you actually directly do this, it's not gonna really work. Even if you have your p-scale there, it's just relaxing them based on a uniform scale, and it's gonna give you this warning that you don't have a radius attribute. That's why we wire it after the p-scale, and it's actually super nice. I really enjoy this, and it's quite fast. It's not slow at all. Okay, I'm just gonna put this on the side. We don't really want to do anything with it. Let's talk about noise. So let's just imagine our input is changing, and it's not really changing its size, and I mean that's also possible, but what we're looking for today is maybe something like this. So I give it a little bit of subdivision, and I just connect it to the mountain. Let's bring the element size up. Let's also add to the amplitude. I would like less roughness, so I'm going to go to fractal and bring it down, and also animate it. So say something like this. When I play it, as you can see, it's going to move. So now when I go to my final results, as you can see, it's just going to freak out because our scattering is actually changing each frame. So how would we actually fix that? Well, that's super simple. We need attribute interpolate. Now, what this node actually requires is two things. Well, three things actually. You need your surface, you need your points, and also you need these two attributes, source prim and source prim UV. Luckily, the scatter node actually can directly output these two attributes, so we put them here. Now, what you want to do in here, well, as you can see, let me just play this one more time. Our points are freaking out. So what I want to do is just making sure my points are sticking to the surface. So, pretty simple. Time shift. And I'm just gonna Control Shift left click, set it to 1. So it's just gonna be sitting on the first frame, and when I play it, it's gonna change. Great. I'm just gonna connect this in here and connect the mountain here directly, basically anything above this time shift, and when I play it, as you can see, they're actually going to be sticking to the surface. You can just add your p-scale, and there we go. But again, something is changing. Now, what's changing right now? You actually go to your attribute from pieces, you can see it's using the p attribute. Now we can easily fix this if we actually switch this to the rest attribute, but we don't really have that particular attribute right now, and we're going to talk about it later in this video. So for the time being, I'm just gonna set it to random, and we're using ID. So let's just actually generate our ID attribute. Oh, actually, I just figured out the problem. It's not about the patch, it's about this one, a p-scale. The p-scale is actually using a noise. So let's set this to random for now, and random for now, and everything is fine. So you have to make sure you're not really using the P attribute for these type of things. And the way I like to set it up is actually just coming here, and we have this static object. So I'm just going to add a rest position. Now what the rest position basically does for us is sort of saving the position on the this particular frame. So right now on the first frame, we actually have this position. They're going to be basically the same. The P and rest are actually right now the same. But as I move forward, if I, for example, come here and go through this, you can see my rest is staying the same, but my position is actually changing. So now, if instead of using, let's just switch this back to noise. If instead of P, I actually rest, and let's just do it in here as well. So instead of random, let's just go to noise and let's set this to rest as well. I play this, they're actually gonna stay on the surface. They're not gonna change. That's what the problem that we had. That's what the problem we were having, because here we had P. And when you play it, you can see everything changes because the noise is actually changing. If you visualize your noise, you can see, since it's using position and this P is changing as we go forward. So the noise is actually going to be, the surface, the points are going to be moving through the noise. It's not going to be the other way around. The noise is staying the same. The noise is going to stay the same on this whole thing in this world. Our surface is going through the noise. If you actually set it to rest, since it's not moving anymore, the only thing that's going to change is our position. So now everything is just staying the same. We're having the same color in here, and we are visualizing our P scale right now. And the way I did that was just simply control middle click on the node, select rest. Select P scale. Now, well, yeah, you can of course visualize your rest as well if you want. This is our rest attribute. And if I actually go to the end, I'm not bringing the rest right now because I'm packing and instancing, but if I uncheck this, you actually get to see your rest attribute as well. But this rest attribute is incorrect because our geometry now has just similar values all over the place. Because correct rest attribute, if I actually add a new rest attribute in here, you can see it changes through this whole thing, because this has a lower rest attribute. For example, in the Y index, the rest attribute in here is going to be lower than top or in here. As you can see, it changes through this whole thing. But if I actually visualize it directly, you can see it gives us just one value, and the reason why we're getting that is because we're setting it up for a point. So when you transfer your geometry to this point, it's gonna inherit the attribute. And if you look in here, you have all the attributes that are gonna get copied. So basically everything except velocity, alpha, n, up, p scale, scale, basically everything with this caret sign in here is not gonna be transferred, but the rest of the attributes are. So you can actually just maybe put down a rest in here and caret rest attribute and think you're done with it. You're not actually, because technically you are creating the correct rest attribute right now. But when you actually play it, you can see, since it's moving, you can see that the rest is actually changing. And if we go to our geometry spreadsheet, you can literally see what's happening. So our rest attribute is in fact changing as we go through time. All right, we're gonna fix this next. And by next, I mean probably in the next like 10 minutes or something. Time being, I am actually going to remove this. I'm going to remove the rest as well. Doesn't really matter remove it or not in here. I'm just going to keep it. All right, so I don't like my direction. Everything is facing up. So what I'm going to do is just come back in here. After I create this mountain, and I'm just going to add normals. Now when I actually add my normals, these are my normals, they're on vertices. I'm actually going to change this to points. There we go. And check this, go back in here. Now, the orientation is actually weird. By default, Houdini actually rotates everything so they're facing the Z direction here. So in order to actually copy them. So I'm just going to add a transfer node and just rotate this 90 degrees. I'm holding down Control so that it kind of snaps to 45 degree, 90 degree. All right. So now they're facing the correct orientation, and I can just play it. And you can see everything is oriented towards the correct position, which is our normals. All right. So we did quite a lot right now. Actually, we figured out how to set the scene up, how to fix everything, how to set up our variant, but it is really, really manual right now. I don't like that. I'm never a fan of working for no reason. And I've been actually working on this sort of tool for a couple of days now. I call it CopyVariants. It's really simple, but when you dive inside, you can see it might look a little confusing. Let me just bring it up. My other scene. Basically what it does is super simple. It just takes care of all our copying issues. If you look closely, and I've added a bunch of object merges because I didn't want to directly connect them. I wanted to keep it a little bit more clean, but basically what I'm doing is just connecting this geo in here. As you can see, my geo doesn't have any attribute on it. I just have a bunch of different geometry. Actually, let me switch this back in here. Instead of visualizing them from there, I actually made a button in here to show me the variants, and these are the variants I'm putting inside this node. So basically I'm adding all of them. It takes care of everything basically, and we are going to walk through this, and I can just literally, let me just pack it so it's faster. I can just keep adding. As you can see, we had Tommy, the pig head, the rubber toy, the shading ball. You can add like different types of boxes. You can add like the strands to it. And yeah, let's just say, show me the variants. Uncheck that, and they actually change. They're moving. Everything is sticking to its place. It's super nice. I just want to check this because I want to make it faster. There we go. Super nice tool. It's actually, as you can see, accepting the density as well. It has quite a lot of values to change. It creates the color. So we're going to talk about how to set this up next. We're not going to really cover this tool particularly because, as you can see, there's quite a lot of stuff happening in here, but we are going to talk about how to get a basic thing from this. And I'm still working on this. If point comes that I'm satisfied with it and I see no bugs, I'm actually going to release it for free. So it's probably going to be useful for you guys. I know I struggled a lot when I was starting Houdini and learning these kind of things. So yeah, if you guys were interested, I can just release it for free when I feel like it's done. Of course, if you want even more advanced tools, you should look into mops. Mops are great. They're available on the motion operators. I think, what was it? Operators.com. Yeah, you can just go download them. They're great. They just introduced Mops Plus, which is apparently even better. It does quite a lot of stuff. So if you want to really get into motion design, yeah, definitely go get that. But something like this is actually kind of interesting, super easy. It does quite a lot of stuff actually, this simple node. And by the way, the icon was downloaded from Flat Icon. I don't know what the name of the website is, but yeah, just wanted to mention that. And it does quite a lot of stuff. So for example, in our adjustments, we can relax it. It's super easy. As you can see, it's not taking any time. You can randomize your N. You can randomize the actual rotation, as you can see. And now they don't look like exact copies. They're changing. You can also just sort of rotate them around each other. You get all these nice interfaces in here. You can change the direction. So maybe like I want to change it in this direction, or maybe in this direction as well. So I wanted to go around this particular axis. You get all the control that you get from attribute adjust float in here with p-scale. You can, by default, it generates color, but you can actually enable advanced colors. So you basically get the attribute adjust color node in here. You can change it from like basically from a random to a noise. You can all these nice presets, which is awesome. And by default, again, it looks up the rest attribute, so that's why the color is not going to change. I can set P in here, and I think it is going to change a little bit as it goes up and down. Maybe it's not, because I think I have a rest attribute and a time shift before it, but we're going to talk about it as we go forward. Don't really worry about that. One of the nicest things about this tool is actually it packs things, and it can actually accept packed geometry. So I'm going to talk about this now, and then we're going to get to actually building the tool. As you can see, we have something like this in here. If I uncheck this pack, as you can see, we lose it, and we start to get two different types of spheres. This is our first sphere. This is our second sphere, and I'm just gonna uncheck, just remove these, so I have simpler shapes, so that I can actually uncheck the pack and instance. Where is it? Pack and instance. Great. So now let's also just uncheck this advanced color, and let's look at it. As you can see, this is our particular box that we had there. This one. And also we have our second sphere. Let's find it. Is it this one? Yeah, it's this one. As you can see, even though in my input I am bringing them together, they are breaking. We're going to talk about the reason that it breaks. But if instead of doing this, if you actually pack everything together, pack this particular object, from the beginning, you can see actually the output is not packed. It's just normal output. If you want, you can pack it, but by default, it's not actually packing it. So anything you want to stay together, you just put down a pack, and tool takes care of it. So enough talking about the tool. Let's actually talk about what we can do in here. All right. So first things I want to get rid of is this variant attribute, and also this color. I don't like the fact that it's being set up like this, so I'm just going to remove the color, and I'm visualizing my rest, so I'm going to uncheck that as well. And after the merge, I'm actually going to put down a color node. So let's go to random from attribute, and let's just load variant. There we go. We can just change this and get different things. So quite easy. We didn't even have to write anything complicated or connect crazy stuff. Just really simple. We just add them together, and the tool take care of the rest of it. I mean, it's not a tool even right now. It's just a simple tree. Next thing, I'm actually going to take care of these variants, because I don't like this. I don't like the fact that I have to just add variant as I go forward. So remove the variant, and tool is gonna just go crazy right now. So let's figure it out. What I want to do is actually I want to create different values for each one of these shapes. Now there's a really good tool for this, and it's called connectivity. Super simple. And when you add this connectivity, you visualize the class, which is what this node is actually creating. You can see we're getting different values, and if you bring this up, you can see class goes from 0 to 3, and we have 0, 1, 2, 3. If I add a loop, you can see it goes from 0 to 4. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And let's just bring the scale to 2.5, so it's going to be smaller. And you can also just add random color to it. Oh, we're realizing the class. So the reason why this is not working is because we're actually creating a class attribute. I can easily change this to variant. I'm not sure if it's gonna work. It is, but this variant attribute is now well, actually it's point. I thought it would set it as primitive, but it is actually by default putting it as point. One thing that you could do in here is, instead of this, you could say for each connected piece. By default, this one actually puts it out as primitive. That's why I was kind of confused, because I'm used to using this connectivity node as a primitive. And now it's generating a class attribute for us. And if you're planning on changing anything, putting it through a loop, adding something based on each one of these, you could just do that. So I'm just gonna rename this variant, and gives us this error. You come down here, you also say variant. Now everything is fixed, but variant is now a primitive attribute, and if you change it to point, it's not gonna work. So you have basically two options in here, either that or actually generate your connectivity attribute based on your variant and add a remote. Make sure you're not deleting it, create a new one, load your variant and call it class. So this way you're actually keeping everything. So of course now, let's just see the delete, no promotion specifier, source and destination classes are identical. Oh yeah, primitive. And this way, well, it's giving us this error because, again, this is set to variant. We changed it, so let's bring it back to class. This is sort of unnecessary. I just want to say you can add so many things in here, and the most basic thing that you can add is just put down a match size, and you can just uncheck all of them to none, but go to justify y and say minimum. So now everything is gonna sit on the ground. Now you might ask, why did you put it inside the loop? Quite simple. If you actually do it outside the loop, so for example, if you put it in here, match size, and just put everything to none, so justify y to min. Now, as you can see, the minimum point of this whole thing, not each one of their iterations, this whole thing, the minimum is gonna be this part, so the bottom of the sphere, and everything is gonna be set according to that. Well, this way, with a simple loop, everything is now sitting on the ground, and you can test it. You can check this, uncheck this single pass, move through it, and as you can see, everything is literally just sitting on the ground. Just look at it from the front. There we go. Real nice. So we did quite a lot. Generated color for them, so let's just also add that, and let's just add it in here. There we go. And we're also rotating them. As you remember, I mentioned Houdini prefers things to be rotated facing the z direction when you're copying something. So let's visualize it. Right now it's still failing. Let's see what the problem is. We have a variant, and variant is actually set to 0. Why is that? Because we're single pass is checked here. So copy 2 points, and there you have it. Many cylinders. Should something about that. Maybe just bring this value up a little bit, and also maybe just make them a little bit smaller because they're too big right now. There we go. Also, these colors are similar. I mean, they're technically different, but since they're too close to each other, I'm just gonna play with it. Again, I keep forgetting that this is not the actual color. This is the variant. This is the actual color. Okay, the actual color is good. Okay, yeah, that's actually pretty good. Now, very simple. Right now, this tool is taking care of everything. Your loop is literally not even your loop. This connectivity node is actually putting the variant where it needs to be. So if I, for example, add a, I mean, I have a torus, I have a platonic object. What am I missing in here? What can I add? Let's add a, let's add a line. Let's just add random object. Let's just sweep it. So it's gonna be a little different. It's gonna be geometry, maybe grid. There we go. Add a bunch of points in here as well. If I actually connect this here as well, you can see I actually get my line as well, my sweeped line. And again, if you don't like the color, you can just play with it. Something looks better, like this maybe. Doesn't really look better, but you know, fine. Yeah, the colors are a little close to each other, so you can definitely else use a more advanced color. You can also just maybe use a color node there instead of actually using it on your geometry, and set it to random from attribute, and just variant. This might actually be better in terms of adding color, because now you're generating your color based on your point, generating geometry. So you know, just normal stuff. Come back here, play this thing. As you can see, it's actually sticking to the geometry surface. If you're not looking for anything that moves, you can just check this. It's on the side, connect it from here, and as you can see, it's just, I mean, it's going crazy if you play it, but normally it's gonna hold. But I prefer actually these geometries sticking to the surface, because it's definitely nicer. And of course, as you can see here, you can check this if you want them to sit on the ground, and if you don't like the way it looks right now, you can maybe merge them together so you can actually see what's going on, the way it's interacting with the surface. This is kind of nice. All right, cool. What else can we add in here? So this is basically the gist of it. You create your variant attribute, you just add your geometry, and then you're basically done here. Now, there are a bunch of other things that you can do. For example, creating a relaxing them. Okay, basically. So first of all, you can actually relax them from scratch here, but this might be too relaxed. I don't know. Depends on what you're going for. And also just not do it and actually use the relax. If you add the relax in here and connect it up there, it is actually gonna kind of break. First of all, it's giving us this error because we don't have our radius. Add the radius there as well. It is gonna work, but since our geometry is moving, it's gonna constantly relax them. And as you can see, they're gonna end up pushing each other. As you can see here, they're pushing each other to the side, and it might not be what you're looking for. It's probably isn't, because you just want it to be relaxed on the first frame and then just do its thing. So what if we actually relax them before putting them into this? So I'm just gonna come here, and since I'm adding my relax, I'm gonna take my p-scale and put it up there just to make sure I'm actually generating my p-scale. And let's just connect it to the time shift. So now I'm actually relaxing them based on their current position in the first frame. Now, there is something that you can change in here, and you can just actually uncheck these two, and your relax can actually output these two attributes as well, which I find it to be working a little bit better when it comes to this whole thing. Now, when I play it, it looks great. Check it out. Play it, it's gonna stick, and it's being relaxed, so you can actually bring it down, and as you can see, it's pretty fast. Much better than what we have before, especially with relax being down there. And it works great. Dope. You can change all sorts of things in here, basically. If you want, You can randomize your normals. So you already have the normals. You're putting them inside this thing. So when you actually generate your points, they are keeping the point normal. And if you this is even set to vertices, they are going to keep it. But why not? Let's just set it to points because we're working with points. So we have our points in here. They're facing this direction. So the next thing that we can do is actually randomizing our up vector. Now the up vector is a companion vector to the normals, especially when you're copying something. So let's add an attribute create first. Now I like to set this up vector to be facing the x direction. This way I have an initial value, and as you can see, it sort of changes. See? So everything is now going to be facing this direction. Have a normal, which is up, and then we have this direction. More advanced orientations are basically with the attribute orient, which is a quaternion, and they are complicated, really complicated. So this is much easier to understand. Now, what I'm going to do next is actually randomizing my up vector. So when I randomize it, this is what I get. They're just going to be random, and it's not really actually, I mean, there's nothing wrong with it, but I want more control. So I'm just going to come here and say direction or orientation. If I go back there and visualize it, this is what I have. It's just too crazy. So let's change it to cone angle. This way I can actually play with the craziness. Here you go. If I visualize it, they're facing this direction. And as I change it, as you can see, we're actually changing the orientation. So great. I mean, if you want, you can actually just remove this. You don't even have to set it up. You can, if you want, you can disable it, and they're gonna have their original orientation. All right. So that's pretty much it about the actual setup. The only thing that you need to remember is always try to set up a loop or something that gives you attributes. This particular attribute variant or anything else, basically. You can even use assemble, but assemble gives us string, basically, so we don't really want that. But connectivity actually gives us this class attribute. And the class attribute is between, it goes from 0 to whatever. Now, let's make our setup a little complicated. If you remember from what I showed you, we had something a little bit different in here. We have a third object. I briefly talked about this, but let's set it up. So I can do whatever I want in here. I'm just gonna change them by hand. You can do it procedurally if you want. I don't really care at this point. I'm just gonna place it up here. Don't really want to complicate things. Just merge them together. The only thing is I don't like quadrilaterals. I'm just gonna change it to polygon. There we go. And well, we actually claimed that this tool is gonna fix everything for us, didn't we? So let's put that to the test. I'm just gonna change this to 0.6. There we go. Now when I actually connect it and go to my connectivity, I visualize it. Variant. As you can see, these two actually have different attributes, different values. So why is that? Well, the answer is quite simple. You're just creating connectivity. It's gonna look at this and say, are they connected? And these are clearly not connected. As you can see, there's just two different objects. You merge them together, yeah, but they're not actually merged together. They're not one object. They're actually two objects. So my solution for this was actually turning this into a packed object, packed geo. So just pack, and Now everything is fine. Technically, this doesn't have an attribute now, so you can actually, I mean, it does, but since it's set to 0, it's not going to really show it. Let's just go to the end. There you have it. Have this object. It's too big for my taste. Even if you look in here, it's just too big. Let's just bring it down to like maybe 2 and 0.1, 0.1, and that's where proceduralism really important. If you set it up correctly, you don't have to actually move this by hand. I'm just too lazy right now. So let's just say 0.2. Let's just say 2. It's too small. There we go. Even maybe a little shorter. So maybe 1. And oh, this is just 1. Say 1.5, maybe 2, and you know what? Let's just do it proceed. I'm just gonna copy this parameter, paste it there, paste relative reference, divide it by 2. It's gonna sit on the ground no matter what you change in here. And let's just merge them together. You can either place it by hand, or you can actually just come back here, say we have the size, so let's just copy the size, come here, go to your center, paste relative reference, and it's going to sit in here. The only thing you need to add is actually your radius. So copy parameter, come here, add a plus, and paste relative reference as well. And there you have it. So now, no matter what you change, this thing is going to sit on the grid. And if you want to really make them look like the other ones, you can just kind of transform, bring it under the ground. So like the others, it's actually not sitting on the ground. It helps us actually test our loop as well. And as you can see, it's working. So when I go to the last one, there we go. We have our object being copied here. It's not technically the same as the rest of them, because hit W and visualize the what's it called, ghost view, wireframe, yeah. You can see this is just one point in space. The other ones are actually not. They are actual geometry, right? Hit Shift W, which shows us the wireframe. This one doesn't have a wireframe because this is just a point. If I middle click on it, it's actually just going to show me 202 packed geos, which are these. Now, of course, you can unpack it here, and you actually get the colors back as well. It is slightly slow, and that's why in my setup, that's not how I did it. I basically generated a stream, a split. So I actually unpack it after that, but it's fine. You don't have to do it like that. I'm gonna show you how to do it though, because I feel like it's interesting. So what I did after basically, maybe in here, seems like this. I'm gonna put down a split. What I want to do is actually I want to split it based on a group. So I need to create that group. So attribute triangle. Now there are things called intrinsics. Go to your primitive, and if you actually go to your packed geometry, and you have all these intrinsics, these are like attributes, but they're being calculated as you go forward. So it's not actually like an attribute. Houdini can calculate these on the go. And the one we're looking for is type name. And if you look in here, it's called packed geometry. Now, if I actually come down here, you can see I have two types now. I have poly, and then I have down here packed geometry. So you can actually see the different types. This is packed, the rest of them are not. So in here, I'm gonna write a really simple code. So first of all, the function that we're going to look for is prim intrinsic. So let's come here, let's hit F1. F1, so the help. Let's look at it. It says I want the geometry. Well, we're on the we're working on the actual geometry, so 0. We're not working on any other stream. Now, intrinsic name. If you look here, our intrinsic is called type name. Type name. We're not looking for poly itself. We're looking for type name. So let's bring the type name. It said string. So put it between quotation, and let's just say type name. And last but not least, we're looking for primnum, and I'm just gonna put down @primnum. Now, by default, it's gonna give us an error when I come out because this needs to be stored somewhere. So I'm gonna actually define a variable string. I'm gonna call it type. It's gonna be equal to this. Great. Now, if you actually instead of this, write it to s@ type is equal to type. You're gonna get this thing. I'm working on points. You can actually work on primitives as well. It doesn't really matter. It can basically read it from anywhere. But let's just work on the primitives. So, and since I'm actually gonna be working on primitives, since I need different groups and stuff like that, let's just stay on primitives because I need different groups for giving the materials. So yeah, primitives it is. So we have our type attribute in here, but we actually don't need the attribute. I just wanted to show you that it can save this as an attribute, and then you can actually access it later if you want. But what I'm looking for right now is really simple. I want to write a if statement. So if type is equal to what? Check it quick. Packed. What? Packed geometry. So if type is equal, and equal is for if. When you want to check something and see if it is equal to something, use equal. If you're just giving it a value, you say normal equal. So what was it called? Packed geometry. If our type is equal to this, no need to actually put down semicolon. I want to define a group, and I'm just going to call it @group underline packed geo, maybe packed geo, and I'm just going to say it's equal to 1. And Houdini just crashed. Great. Yep, I think I forgot to save it actually. So give me a couple of minutes and I'm gonna bring it back. So thankfully, apparently I actually had saved it, so I just lost like 5 minutes of work, basically this code. Yeah, let's just get to it then. So we say @group underline packed geo is equal to 1, and then now we have our group. If I go to my primitives, I have this group in here. As you can see, it's set to 0, and as I scroll down here, it's set to 1 on one of my primitives. And don't forget, this whole thing is just one primitive right now. And if I actually hit this button right here, I can actually visualize my groups. And right now we're on, can be on primitives, it can be on points. By default, it's just match selection type, so it's gonna show us our primitives by default. Now, well, we have our group. Well, then let's just split it. And I think this is a much better way of actually setting things up. So I'm just gonna say packed geo and maybe invert selection because I want the main input to actually put out this thing. And just put down merge there. And if I directly connect it, well, nothing really happens. But if I actually unpack it, there you go. So now I'm actually unpacking everything. And I would recommend actually just down a star there so that it actually transfers every attribute. But don't worry about this one. I'm not going to actually check it because I don't want this particular group that I just made. And this way, I'm actually getting my geometry. And it's, as you can see, fast because it's not unpacking everything. It's just unpacking anything that's packed. Isn't that nice? Like right now, if I say, okay, I want a sphere, and let's visualize it. Let's see what we have there. And let's make a copy. Let's bring it there. Let's merge them together now. Let's maybe make this one a little bit smaller. put it there. And again, let's just pack it. And another thing that you can do if you want is actually preserving all your attributes. I mean, right now we don't have anything, but if you have something that you're putting inside this, you can actually just preserve your attribute. You can preserve your groups. It's gonna be fine. So now if we look at this, I mean, they're too big, so I'm just gonna add a transform. Too lazy. Good artist is a lazy artist. So there you have it. And they're actually sticking to each other. And if you come to this, you can actually see it's putting all of them together. So no matter what you put inside this, it's gonna create your variant attribute. It's gonna calculate it up there. So you have correct variants. It's gonna place them correctly on the ground. If you want, you can uncheck this. And then it's gonna just create a group called group packed geo, and whatever is packed, it's gonna put it there. And when you split it, the normal ones, the geo just goes to the left stream. The right one is gonna have the packed geo, and then there you have it. Very simple. And I'm not the biggest fan of this color, so let's just where's it? Through this. I find the 0 to be really confusing, because I keep thinking that these actually don't have a value. Something is wrong, and you can use it for debugging. So I like to set this at least to be like 1, and I always change this seed to actually be an integer. I find it to be much more easier, and I mean, it's not gonna work like now, right now, because well, this is a Houdini tool. You can't really change those. You can either create a separate parameter in here, set that one to be integer, and then just copy the parameter. Or what I've done, since I was making a tool for myself, I just promoted this to the surface using a integer. So it's literally doing the same thing I said. Again, if I set it to 0, I get the weird white ones, which I don't like, so start with 1. Great. There are a bunch of other things that you can do in here, and I'm just moving past this and just talking really quickly about the kind of stuff that you can do. Obviously, you can bring your density attribute, whatever you define up here, as density, and I actually prefer defining it before the mountain, because let's just say attribute float adjust, visualize it, let's call it density, visualize the density. It's now set to 0, so I can just change it to maybe a noise. There you go. Maybe make it a little bigger. There you have it. And now if I actually add the mountain, it's actually staying the same. If you add it after this, the density is gonna change according to the noise. As you can see, it's changing. Now, it might be something that you want. Personally, I'm not looking for that. And if you come here, enable your density, you will get some sort of density down there, but since we're actually relaxing the hell out of it in here, you're not gonna really see that. So let's just bring it down here. There we go. You actually uncheck this, it's going to give us this error because, well, it's looking for the density. So the way to just make sure it's working or not, just add a rank out, say sign density is going to be equal to 1. There you go. So this is density 1, and this is density using that. Now, I came up with a solution for actually checking to see if I have density, because I prefer to have an interface that's less crowded. So on my tool, when you go to scatter, you only have like these 3 options. You can say advanced interface and get the actual interface of the scatter tool, but this way you only have like these 3 options, which are the basic, the most important ones. The forced order count, the color seed, the global seed, and the relaxed iterations, which are basically the ones you most of the time use. And I've actually checked this density to always be available because I came up with a solution to kind of look inside my tool and see if I already have the attribute density, set it to be equal to density. If I don't have that, set it to be equal to 1. So let's just set it up real quick right here. I'm gonna put down a wrangle, remove that. Let's just write, I think, like 2 lines of code, maybe 3, I'm not sure. It's super simple. You don't have to even worry about it. Look it up real quick. So what I want to do in here is, as I mentioned, we just want to check and see if there is an attribute. So I'll say if, and like my if statement. And since I mentioned we actually gonna need an else statement as well. So if we're gonna use a function called hasPointAttrib. There we go. And let's look it up real quick. Always check the help page. So it takes 2 arguments, the geometry, well, 0, we're working on ourselves, and attribute name, density. So if you have the density attribute, well, then let's just declare f at density. Don't really need to do anything. But else, if you can't find it, we're gonna say f at density is equal to 1. There you go. So now if I actually disable this, as you can see, it works. Before adding this, it would give us this error because it was looking for the density and it couldn't find it. But now it's not giving the error because it is finding it. Let's add a little bit more to it. What I want to do here is now adding a mask. So what if I want an object in here? I don't want anything around it, basically. I'm going to come here, my surface, and I'm going to put down a mask from geometry. Great. Let's just add a sphere. I'm going to just add it in here, and this is going to be my mask. So basically what I want to do in here is tell Houdini I want points everywhere except this thing inside. But since I actually have control over it, and let me just uncheck this. Let me uncheck density as well. If you hit enter, you actually can't see the mask. So I'm just going to invert it. So basically have everything in here except the middle. You can of course just invert it. So it's a good option to have on the actual tool if you want to make it, or your just workflow. This way you just know what you're gonna do in here, and you can just promote it. Maybe you want stuff to be in the middle, maybe you want stuff to be outside. I kind of prefer the outside because if I just want the inside, I just put down like a circle. But this is a nice interface to have on our tool. So let's just bring it down here. Now again, we're gonna repeat the same thing with it up there. So let's just give this a little bit of space. Bring it in here, and let's just put down another angle. Now again, I'm just going to copy my code from here. I'm going to say if has attribute mask, or actually let's not put it that way. If it has attribute density, yeah, that's we're going to say f at density gonna be multiplied and equal to f at mask. So this way, if you find this density attribute, if as you're going through my geometry, if you see this attribute exists, set it to be equal to that. If you don't find it, actually don't multiply it, just say it's equal to mask. So let's visualize our density now. There you go. And if I this thing a little cleaner inside each other, like that. There we go. If I actually re-enable it, there you have it. So before this, if I actually don't have this, well, nothing is really changing. I'm not including the mask. So basically I'm telling Houdini, if you already have a density attribute and I'm putting the mask, multiply it by the mask, and I can just invert it and check it again. It's going to be on the inside now. Everything is working. Again, let's just invert it, visualize. Now, if I don't have this f at density by default, so this situation, just use this mask attribute as my density, which is basically what I want to have in here anyways. So connect it there, go to my output, and there you go. Now we have density everywhere. It's still following the noise, so these parts are empty, but we're also having this thing in the middle, which is kind of nice. I mean, I'm pretty happy with this. So everything is basically done. The only thing that I'm worried about is my rest attribute. Now, what is rest attribute actually? Let's talk about rest. So in order to talk about it and actually understand rest, I mean, I touched it briefly, but let's actually see what it's useful for. Because we actually saw the fact that, well, we can control our noise, we can control our color, so we don't have to actually change it as the geometry moves. But there's actually a really, really important role that this attribute plays for us. So let's put down a sphere. I'm gonna visualize it. Don't need that, but let's just increase it. I'm gonna add a camera, and I'm also just gonna add light. So I can either use one of my other tools, project, which I use to set up my scene, and by default it can actually give me a RS light dome. Super easy. I'm not going to share this because the whole point is that it gives me the light dome by default, and well, it kind of goes to my heart. It's really set to work on my folders and load what I want, and I can just change this, and it literally switches to the next HDRI for me. That's the whole point of this tool. I know it's super simple, but it's useful, and I can just add notes to it, stuff like that. It kind of does other things too, so it defines this project name, which stays consistent throughout my whole project. So even if I add numbers in here, this is gonna stay the same. By default, it's set to HIP name, so it changes as well, but I can just say, I don't know, ABC, or I don't know, my scene, and the line as well. And I can actually reference this particular parameter inside whenever I have a file cache. And I have another preset for that one as well. So it basically goes and looks, doesn't matter, basically goes and looks for this channel out there in my OBJ. I think I've made some changes there, so that's why it's not actually loading correctly. It doesn't really matter. I'm happy with it. I should go back to this and check it out. Maybe I change. Oh yeah, it's using project. It should actually use project 1. So let me actually update this real quick, because well, I like being lazy. Well, what did I call it? File cache version. Okay. Yeah. Save preset. Where's it? Save preset. Cache version. It's good that I noticed this because it's super important. So again, as I mentioned, if you put down like a file cache, and if I use this particular parameter, now it's working. It's giving me my scene as the name in here. So I can just change this, and it's gonna change it down there. And no matter what file cache I use, it's gonna still stay consistent and reference this particular name in there. So that way I actually can just change the names up there and everything stays consistent. Anyways, it doesn't really matter for our project. Just wanted to talk about that real quick. I'm actually going to just remove this as well and look at my camera. Where is it? It's there. Let's just add one redshift light. There we go. Now we're done. It's going to go to my camera, and I'm gonna render view. All right, everything is working. Our SMAT builder. It's gonna assign it. Come down here and add a noise. It's the actually the max on noises. There we go. Everything is working. I'm gonna save it. I'm gonna make sure I have my you're activated. I don't have it. You can really set it as permanent defaults. I have it on permanent defaults, which basically looks for everything I have in my scene. It changes this thing to be sub-level updates. So when I move this, it's actually gonna update it. If I don't have this there and just start moving around this thing, I'm not gonna see any changes. So let's just add a transform. We bring it up, and technically it's still working because I think because we had it on by default. So it's now looking at that. I re-render it. I think now it's not gonna work. Oh, it is. Great. Doesn't matter. Good for Redshift. They changed it. Anyways, I still prefer just checking this. I think this is actually new because deformation volumes, instances, and proxies. I think it used to only update, just not update anything. I think right now it actually can update this by default. I just upgraded my Redshift, and by the way, Redshift is not available for this version, but they have a custom build which works with 19.0.455. Right, we have a noise. I'm just gonna change it to maybe Booyah, which is a lot of contrast, and it's really obvious when I make any changes in here. So maybe like something like this, so it's super obvious what I'm changing. Now, if I actually come here, go to my translate, I'm just gonna pause this. Right click, let's go to motion effects, let's just add noise. I wanna play it, you can see it's just gonna go crazy. Bring the period up, roughness down. I get something like this. There we go. It's good enough for what I want. There we go. Now, if I play this, and we don't have any attribute. So, as I move through time, you can actually notice it right there. The noise is in fact changing according to my position. You can see I'm just moving one frame, but the noise is actually moving through this whole thing. And I don't like that because I want this noise to stick to my surface. The way to do it is actually I can just easily add the rest position there, and by default Redshift is now looking at this rest instead of my current position in space. So as you can see, now the position is staying consistent and nothing is actually moving, as you can see. Again, take this, move it. There you go. The noise is actually moving in here. If you look closely, bring it back. There you go. The noise is moving through our surface. Basically, our sphere is moving through noise. And if I actually enable it, noise is sticking literally to the surface. Great. So we're gonna use the same concept for our copied variants. So how can we actually do that? Well, I mean, we did generate a rest attribute up there, but if I actually render this thing right now, it's gonna look terrible. Because there you go. Your values are actually sitting on the points. They're not actually sitting on the geometry. So this whole platonic solid, or this whole sphere, actually only has one value, nothing more, and that's not gonna work for us. By the way, I should remember to update my antivirus. It's expiring and I need to buy it for the new year. Virus is just so stupid, but you have to have it. That's what keeps giving the warning. I don't know if you guys can hear it or not, but it keeps popping up on my second monitor here. It distracts me. All right. So yeah, as you can see, we don't have a rest attribute on our geometry. It's just sitting on our point. So what's the easiest way of setting it up? Well, super easy. First of all, you can actually set it up in here if you want. You can go rest. And if I actually, if I visualize rest right now, I'm not gonna have it, because as you can see, this rest is actually coming from here. If I uncheck this, this is the rest that's coming from my object, but it messes my scene. So what I like to do is I'm just gonna put it there. Maybe after this attribute from pieces. So in here, I'm just gonna say attribute delete and delete my original rest. And while I'm at it, I'm just gonna say, you know what, let's just remove everything. Let's see what we have. We have p-scale. We want p-scale. So caret p-scale. We want up. We want, what else do we want? Variant. Yeah. Of course, variant. There we go. And I don't think preserving the normals as well. So maybe normals too. There we go. And I mean, if you want, you can just literally specifically say, I don't want the rest. Don't want to complicate things, and then just clean everything afterwards. That also. So there you have it. So right now you have actual rest position in here, but again, it's not functioning for this object. So even better place to put it before rotating it. There you have it. This is now really good, but our values are now gonna stay the same on similar objects. So all my boxes are gonna be similar. All my tubes are gonna be similar. And if I actually come here through my camera, and by the way, as you can see, this is set to 0 right now because we didn't define any rest attribute on this particular object. So if you want to change that, you can either define a rest attribute there, or you can just uncheck it and import it from another place. Basically, if you don't have the rest attribute, but you're merging them together, this is going to be set to 0, and you're not going to be getting anything. So if I actually visualize it right here, there you have it. As you can see, the ground is set to 0, and these actually have value, but they look literally similar. Like they're not really changing. If you actually don't want this to stay the same, either add like rest attribute this position there, so it changes, but it becomes kind of crappy to look at. So I'm just going to remove that. But if you have, if you're merging stuff together, all of them need to actually have the rest attribute, because a Redshift is going to load the rest, even if you have it on one object and then you're merging them together. So either just load this in a separate geocontext, or just create a rest attribute for it. Now, the problem here is the movement. Right now, my rest is staying the same. Okay, it's not moving. It's so crappy because they all have the same value. I still want an actual noise based on the position. I just don't want it to be based on the 0 position, or the position that it had on the center of the world. This thing. Also, I don't want it to change according to the movement. Otherwise, I could just, create the rest position after this copied point. Now, it gets a little tricky maybe at first, because you keep wanting to go to maybe matrices, load, like extract, transform, things like that, but it's just so simple. Let's do it. So wrangle, very simple. I'm just gonna add this from here. Now what I want to do is actually freeze this thing. So let's put down a time shift. Let's freeze it to the first frame. So now it's not moving. I'm gonna define my rest attribute then. Again, not moving. I'm gonna put it into the wrangle. What I'm gonna say is really simple. I have my rest. This thing is sitting perfectly. If I play it now, it's perfect. It's literally what I wanted. The only problem is it's not moving. So how do I bring the movement back? And let me just erase the whole thing. As you can see right now, it's not the crappy noise that was just repeating on all of our objects. Right now, it's not like this. It's actually a noise that's going through the whole scene. But how do I get it to move? Because right now my ground is moving, but my objects are staying the same. Well, that's why I have my wrangle. If you look at this, these objects, they're moving. So they have a moving position. Let's look at their moving position. This is the P attribute. It's moving. There we go. We have the point attribute P. In here, my P and my rest are staying the same. So it is simple. I'm just gonna say at sign P is equal to the position that's coming from this node. So I'm gonna load a point attribute. I'm gonna look at the second input, so 1. I'm gonna load my P attribute, and well, I have my point number is staying consistent through this whole thing. So there you go. Now when I play it, it's moving. And as you can see, I'm generating new rest attribute based on the position. And I can actually do the same thing, bring it over here, and repeat it for my my ground. Just connect it to the ground real quickly. So this is the ground. Yes. Oh, moving. Yep. Now I get this is again staying consistent no matter what. So now I have this thing, correct rest attributes just sitting there moving nicely. And if I play it again, I have my ground right now. If you don't want to actually get it, you can just remove it. But as you can see, everything is just sticking. Just uncheck this real quick. Move through our geometry. Perfect. The only downside here is checking this pack and instance, because it's gonna break our setup. The points are actually not gonna stay in the correct position because right now they're just points, and again have a crash. I don't know why Houdini has been crashing for me lately so much. I think it's related maybe to the update, or maybe Houdini 19 is not stable. Also, I've been getting a lot of crashes when I'm packing stuff, so maybe that's connected. I don't know. Okay, let's load the scene again. I don't think it saved it. No backup was found. Great. Open the scene again. Close YouTube. Where you can actually see how many tutorials I've kind of prepared. I've never had time to actually record it. CopyVariants. Let's hope. Oh yeah, we have it actually. We pretty much have. Great. I'll check pack and instance. I don't want. Visualize the rest. It says a mismatch of attributes, which is like the variant, CD, rest, all of them, since we're actually merging together. So, really simple. In my opinion, quite useful. This was just one scenario of using this tool. You can just create different stuff. So let me just bring my tool up real quick. So my tool actually comes with a sort of example, which is using curves instead of actual geometry. So using the second input. And I can just come here and check the geometry and say check the curve. That's what it's generating. So it sort of generates something like a plant. I can just bring this up like 10,000 and I get this nice plant looking thing. I can also just scale it bigger, make them. I can also add geometry to them if I want. I'm just going to bring it down to like 1,000 so it's lighter, and go to curve, add geo. visualize my geo, I can literally just scale, play with it. It's super simple. When the tool is finally ready, I am going to release it if you guys are interested. But as you saw, it's not really a complicated setup. It's mostly about just spending the time to set this up by scratch. And the curves are actually following a different tree. So this is the one for the geometry, and this is the one for the tree. Since it's sort of like a preset, that's why it's a little complicated. I'm gonna also show you how to set that part up, but it's not gonna be really hard. Just you need to spend a little bit time figuring it out. So we put down a line. Let's focus on it. Visualize the points. Let's just resample it. And by the way, I have also like this rest in peace node, which basically does the same thing. It just time shifts it. It puts down a rest position, wrangle, sign p is equal to blah, blah, blah. And we just have this thing, and it actually can rest it on different frames, which I find it to be quite useful. So resample. Let's just say 0.0, maybe 5. And I'm also going to put down the curve view. Let's put down an attribute swap. Maybe dive inside. Say add the position based on an AA noise. What I want to do with my noise is move it based on time. So VV4, vector to vector 4. I'm going to add my time in here. I'm going to add this thing to the position. It's going to look weird. I'm going to change it to 3D. Now it's going to move all over the place. So in here, I'm just going to add a multiply, bind my curve view attribute, call it curve view. And now it's going to sit on the ground. It's too radical for me, so bring it down, start up a little bit, and maybe add a multiply by constant and just bring it to something like this. Yep, that's pretty good. What I'm gonna do next is, well, let's just promote the offset attribute. I'm just gonna I'm gonna say float to vector 4 and just add a constant there, and just, or maybe actually just add a parameter so I have it on the surface. Just simply connect these together. So now you could have just easily promoted the offset, but then you would have 4 outputs there, 4 inputs there. I just want 1. This thing is working, it's moving. I'm just gonna copy this thing. I'm gonna put it there. What I want to do is really simple. I'm gonna put down an orient along curve. But this is another way of another setup. It's not the same setup that we were doing. I'm gonna just change this to be an x-axis, the target up vector, so that the curve doesn't roll around itself as it moves. It actually kind of happens when you have this thing set on curve normal. The up vector keeps just juggling around. I think if I set in here, you can see it. As you can see, it keeps going around our curve. You can actually set it to axis, and then it's just gonna stay in the same general direction, which is always nicer. I'm just gonna put down scatter. What I'm gonna do in here, I'm gonna also carve it so it doesn't start from the very beginning. Scatter, let's just switch it to maybe 100. So uncheck this up vector, rest, we don't need that. Thing is correct. Just come here. I'm gonna switch the direction to be on 1, and I'm just gonna put down CTP. There you have it. Now they are sitting this thing. It looks great. Let's just switch it to 5 and maybe bring this thing up, bring this thing down. Now the orientation is actually not the greatest at the moment, so I'm gonna after creating this, I'm gonna add randomize my n attribute and start to see it actually starts to look nice. I'm gonna say direction, phone angle, and just in the direction attribute, I'm just gonna type n, so it's gonna be in the relative direction. And yeah, that's pretty much it. You can actually randomize your p-scale as well. Maybe something like this. Actually moving. And if you want more examples from setups like this, you can actually visit my course. I covered this thing really in depth in the class. So we have our basic shape again. Instead of just using this whole thing, I'm gonna put this on the side, put it there, that, and let's just bring our file, our curves. And right now, I'm just getting one variant. And I mean, technically, I don't even have the variant. It's just, I have in here, it's just a shape. So I'm just gonna actually merge these together, get this shape, and maybe make the p-scale, or actually the general scale in here down a little. It's more natural this way. And maybe like 50, 56, I don't know. Yeah, so what I want to do, and of course you can still copy this attribute swap and place it in here after your copied points, but or actually after your merge. But now the scene is kind of breaking because, well, your points aren't really moving in a good way. They're kind of staying. If you look at the above, it's not really affecting anything since it's using our curve view. So these parts are literally being affected, and the bottom is only being affected by this. So if I actually uncheck it, you can see it literally stays the same. That's not my point. So what I can do is actually uncheck curve view in here. So say don't actually transfer curve view. Now it's gonna be weird because then the beginning of curves are gonna stay in their place. They're not gonna be affected. What's the solution? The solution is actually quite simple. First of all, bring the curve view because I do want to have that particular curve view that goes like this. Also, just change this to be curve view 2. Now let's just dive inside, change the name to curve view 2 as well. So this way, I'm actually affecting the whole scene. I get my curve view. I'm not losing this new curve view that I made, this one. So I'm actually keeping it. And what you can do is actually just, you know, keep playing with these values to get something nice out of it. This way now you have like multiple attributes that you can use in your shading. So for example, the tips can be a different color. You also have your original curve view, which you can use to just add a general color to it. You can use it for the general p-scale. Again, I covered these in my course really thoroughly, so if you want to check those out, be sure to check out the course. But just to give you a quick note about this, what I want to do now is I'll copy this thing. First of all, it's super tiny, so I don't want it to move anymore. I mean, it can. I just want to do it. So they're super tiny. I don't want that. Let's just come back in here and make the p-scale bigger. So 1. There you go. Position looks actually kind of weird, so just go back to our CopyVariants. And the reason why we're not actually seeing anything is because we have this variant. So I'm gonna uncheck it just to be able to see this, what's going on in here. And I'm not happy with my direction, so let's just rotate this thing. Now, my whole point in here is actually introducing, I have in here, I don't know, I have motion effect. I think this is a bug. I don't think, huh. You know what, let's just remove this. There you go. And we want to rotate it towards the positive Y. I'm gonna move there, and if I come here, should be fine now. Oh, I connected it actually. There you have it. So now they're just being repeated. So what we're going to do is actually generating the same thing. We want to create our variant, but I'm not going to use for each primitive. I'm just going to simply use for each number, because I just want an iteration. I just want a number here, and I don't really care about anything. So I'm just going to put the start there. I'm gonna put the finish in here, and then I'm gonna have my iterations there. And you can just call this thing meta just to make it simpler to the address as we go forward. So first things first, let's create an attribute, either attribute wrangle or attribute create. Wrangle is easier, but let's just put down the create. Integer. In the value section, I'm gonna say detail. I wanna access the meta. I'm gonna say duration, and I'm gonna say 0. And another quotation there. There we go. So each iteration, it's gonna give me a different value there. So by default, it's gonna be 5 right now. Iteration 2 is gonna be 2. So this is gonna be my variant. Very simple. Review. Now, right now, I have like 3,000 points because I'm just putting all of them on top of each other. So what I'm gonna do, first of all, randomize the color, just so that I can actually see what's going on, and they're just gonna be on top of each other right now. So it's not that helpful, but again, you want to see something. So if you look closely, you can see like a tiny shadow of something different, but this is where it gets interesting. So these parameters that we basically promoted, these are our offsets. So we can use the same thing from here. And by the way, you can either just use this or actually call the iteration if you want. Both work fine. So let's use the same argument from here in order to drive our offset. So put it there, get different values. Put it there, different values, and put it here, and we get different values. There you have it. Now we have all these different plants basically. And so now if I actually check this variant attribute, I'm gonna get different results. And they're going to be sitting on top of each other, and as you can see, they're facing the same direction. So if you randomize your up attribute, they're going to look different. They're not going to same. You can add geometry to it. You can do so many things with it. It's awesome. There you go. And again, I think we're also calculating the rest. Visualize that. And if you have a moving base, it's also gonna stick to it. Just double nice. Basically not depending on anything, just generating its own rest attribute, so it can be used in your rendering. Now in the thumbnail we had this thing. If you look closely, you can actually start to see some of them. That's what I mean by using variants. This is very subtle. I didn't create multiple versions of these plants or even these ones. I think I just made about like 10 or 20 using the same workflow that I just showed you, and it's just gonna sorry, let me actually find the project file to show you what I did there. So basically, I just added surface, added some sort of a water effect on top of it. It's just a simple mountain node. I have my ground as well. I have nice shading. Looks like the ground, and then as you can see, these are just strands that I generated p-scale for them. We have our main objects that are being scattered here as well. These are like going through a different sort of loop. These are going through their own sort of thing. And yeah, as you can see, it actually looks kind of nice. Get all these different variations. They don't look the same, even though they're pretty much the same thing. Like these are basically strands, and at the end I just copy the shape on top of them, and since I'm adding displacements to them, they're looking really different. And since we have the rest attributes, they can actually move. You can animate this thing, they can go around. It's going to be a nice environment. So this is the file. Let me bring it real quickly. By the way, I'm just selecting a part of it. I didn't want to set it up like that. I'm selecting it based on the camera. I covered this technique in one of my older tutorials. As you can see, yeah, these are the geometry that I'm adding in here. This might be a different scene file. I'm not sure because I made a bunch of different versions for this. Actually, the same, I think. Yeah, it's the same thing. So yeah, let's just see how many different iterations we have. 35 for these, and they have like this nice movement to them. And we also have 40 for these. They actually, I think, kind of grew up as well. If you want to enable that, you can actually add a carve node on top, so it actually grows up like this. You can also add the same thing for your geometry. It can actually grow up like from 0. If you actually enable your carve as well, it's gonna look like this. Grow up, which is always more interesting. Let's uncheck these. Have it. Put this in. Yeah, uncheck. So yeah, that's this week's tutorial. It was a little bit different, so we didn't really do any rendering. It was about the workflow itself. Quite simple, very practical. So you're just not creating a variant by hand. You're just putting it inside the loop. And I know it took some time to set it up, but when you actually know what you're doing and you're just not trying to talk about it like me, you can literally just put down 3 or 4 nodes and then just keep iterating through them. You can also just change your input, maybe put down like a, let me bring up the other tool I set up here. So uncheck the curves, check the geometry, and let me just remove all these connections. Add these. And as you can see, I'm just literally iterating through just one box and changing its scale based on this for each number, the same thing that we used in the previous setup. And I'm just accessing the iteration and then just fitting it between a value, creating a random value basically, and fitting it between 0.25 and 1 in the X, different stuff there, and then just adding a seed value so that they're not uniform. And I get something like this. I have like 3 iterations now. Let's just increase it to 10. Let's come here. There you have it. You can just play with it, super easy. You get so many different stuff in here, which is just awesome. I love it. And what else can I talk about in here? I think we're pretty much done. I encourage you to just play with this, try to come up with your own setups. Super helpful, super fun, really nice, and that's pretty much it. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I'm sorry I wasn't really active in the past couple of weeks. I had my live course, and I have so many client works right now that this is the only time I found to just cover something while I wait for the new files from the client to be downloaded on my system. And yep, that's it. If you have any questions, as always, you can reach me on Instagram. You can email me. You can message me on the Houdini School Discord if you have any questions. And as always, the scene files are available. You can go through them. You can just check out what we made in here, play with them. Pretty simple, not really anything too complicated. Just check them out, play with the rest attribute. It's quite important when it comes to rendering. And just maybe try to come up with your own tools. It's always nice to have shortcuts, especially when it comes to Houdini. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you have a wonderful time playing with Houdini. Bye bye.